Hey folks, Nathan here. In our last video, we took a look at some tiny storage boxes for Tiny Epic Kingdoms because we'd already looked at Tiny Epic Kingdoms in depth. The first edition, the second edition, the expansion, all the little extra Kickstarter goodies and whatnot, the mats and everything. So, having looked at that with Ultra Tiny Epic Kingdoms, gosh, we looked at a lot of stuff in that video, it was time to take a look at the licensed storage boxes that came from eRaptor/Poland Games. Tiny Epic Dungeons is similar. We've already looked at this game in depth. We've looked at the prototype and all of its components because I was one of those honorary producer pledgers. Then we looked at the final version and all the different expansion goodies that came with it. The last thing for us to look at then for Tiny Epic Dungeons is this new storage box. And again, this is from eRaptor/Poland Games. It funded through Kickstarter. It has been available in subsequent pledge managers through Kickstarter or later subsequent Kickstarters, and it is something that you should be able to buy straight from eRaptor/Poland Games in the near future, if not already. Just bear in mind, these are made of wood. They are slats of wood that are packaged, so they're a little bit more costly to ship, and you do have to put them together. However, they do not require any glue at all. It is all snapped together wood, painted on one side, black on the other side for every single piece, and has a nice acrylic top with art to it. As I said last time near the end, the size of these do vary, so we'll take a look at a comparison between the size of this one and Tiny Epic Kingdoms. It only holds one box a little bit later, but first let's do a quick comparison to the size of a standard Tiny Epic box by using Tiny Epic Defenders as an example because I happen to have that one handy. A video on that will be coming sometime soon. This is the Tiny Epic Defenders box. It is the same size as all the standard base game boxes for Tiny Epic games. You'll notice here that these boxes are significantly wider, deeper, whatever you want to call it, and way longer. These are not meant to be more compact, but as we get into games like Tiny Epic Dungeons, it's tough to actually fit everything back in the box, and if you want a sleeve, you're in for a serious headache. These boxes are meant to hold sleeved cards, help with organization, help with storage, and include everything for the game inside the box, with the exception of Kingdoms, Galaxies, and Defenders, where those are divided into two boxes because the original game was in two large regular-sized boxes. As far as height goes, it is a pretty substantial difference here. It's basically double the height of a typical Tiny Epic box, but that is only for ones like Dungeons and Crimes, where there's a ton of stuff to cram into the box when you start combining the different products together. That is not the case for most of them. So I said we'd look at it later. Later is now. Notice the difference here. Tiny Epic Kingdoms, just the regular Tiny Epic Kingdoms box and this little bonus deluxe edition content versus Tiny Epic Dungeons, which is the Dungeons main box with its extra content plus stories plus a place to put the boss meeples and your extra dice and so on. I would note, although it should be breathtakingly obvious, that none of these will actually fit any of the neoprene playmats. Not the big ones, nor any of the small ones that are like the player mats to organize your stuff. Speaking of mats, before we go any further, I would note here they did finally acknowledge that they misprinted the first version of these Tiny Epic Dungeons mats where there's a set of lines here that are meant to line up with where we see the sort of cross shapes, but they didn't line up correctly when they were printed because of a bad layer, I guess, in Photoshop or wherever they were using to make it. But they have fixed that on subsequent printing. So if you get one now or you get one from a pledge manager at this point, as I am actually getting a replacement for this one because it's my favorite game and I want to have it, in that nice, non-frustrating look, you can get it now and it will be fixed, but those first printings do have that misprint in the way that it is laid out. They have finally acknowledged that. Anyway, boy, I'm rambling. Let's dive into the Tiny Epic Dungeons storage box. So as with the others, the front has art and has the title. The right side has art, horizontal. The left side has art, also horizontal, also with the logo so you can put it on your shelf like on a Kallax and stack it up and see which game is which. I would note that when you're putting these together, it tells you which parts are where on the punch boards, but they don't actually show you any of them, so it would be very easy to accidentally swap the front and back or swap the left and right sides. I've been very careful to make sure they're all oriented correctly. And there's the back, also no art. The bottom is just black, as is the back of any of the wooden pieces that are punched out from the boards. Art on one side, black on the other. Here's our acrylic cover. Nice art there. As I mentioned last time, these have a little plastic film you need to peel off when you get it, otherwise it might look and feel a little funky. Then we have our place for our manual, and I have just put the little Potions of Perils manual inside it to keep it safe. We have our Adventures storybook from Stories. This top tray in the instructions doesn't tell you what's supposed to go there, but it is where you're supposed to be putting these boss meeples. I guess if you take it off there, it could also be a nice little dice tray, although there's no padding. Might be a little noisy as a dice tray. Take this out. You see other trays for components here. We've got a tray here. This is for our loot. And I have them sleeved. These are, I believe, Sleeve Kings 60 micron. I know they're Sleeve Kings. I think they're the 60 micron ones because usually the premium ones for Sleeve Kings are a little extra long compared to normal. So you got one for your loot. Nice art and everything on it here. One for your dungeon tiles and such here. You have one for your spells. Now I would note with the spells, that is where I have put the potions and the story cards, because they do not have a separate dedicated place. You're just assumed to be putting them inside one of the other trays here. Then we have our essentially enemy cards. We have our goblins and our minions all together here. Notice mine are not sorted, but they really are, because I've sorted by whether it's from an expansion or from the base game or from Potions and Perils. So, you know, it is sorted from a certain point of view. Then we have a long tray here. We've got our minion meeples and our goblins, although we do need to put a couple of the minions over here. You could just put some of them in that top tray, but whatever. I just put them in here and just kind of scooted our little goblins off to the side. Notice I did make some slight liberties with the way that the instructions tell you to organize stuff to make sure everything would actually fit, because I do have all the extra goodies. Then this tray here is going to be for all of our dice. Then we have our focus tokens, health tokens, altar tokens, and the minion health tokens, along with our one torch token, all just kind of like in there together, because we'll pull them out together during setup. Then you have another one. This is where I have put those disarm tokens, the two boss tokens if you're not using the actual meeples, and then the markers for when you're doing stories. And then the way they have the miniatures is snapped into frames. So like even if I put this upside down, they're not going to fall out. They essentially just snap into a Slim Jim, right? They just snap into these frames. So like, notice here, they're just meant to give a little bit. So you just sit it down, slide it back. Now it's snapped in, will not fall off. And there's another tray of them as well, or whatever you want to call it, stand tray of them here. So that is all 16 of your heroes. And you have all your large cards. Notice plenty of rooms for sleeved cards in this tray here. So Torchmat, heroes, bosses, all that kind of stuff in there, along with just a regular Gamelin logo background here. So you can just basically take everything, be like, okay, I am done playing for the day. Again, everything is just snapped together wood. So it actually makes use of the fact that they have the little prongs sticking out, because a lot of times the prong sticking out of the bottom of one will fit into the groove on another one as a way of kind of keeping them together. Like you'll notice here, notice it's got dip, dip here, and then the prong in the middle. That is because your next one on top is going to kind of fit in to those grooves. Kind of hard to see, but you know what I mean. In this case, it's got one on that side. But they are meant to fit together. Again, you just kind of take your stuff as you're packing up. Put them all back in there. You don't even need to necessarily take the decks out and sort them or anything, because they're already in there for you, already organized. Put that in. This kind of wish this one did have one of those tray covers, but it does not. Put these in. Get your top. And again, it has little prongs on either of these little edges that match the longer pieces here, whatever you want to call them, tabs. And we'll pop on. This part will be essentially flush. These will stick out just a little bit to snap on, and you are good to go to not really travel with, but store away your Tiny Epic Dungeons. I wouldn't travel with these. The tops will pop off not super easily, but pretty freaking easily. These are meant to be stored wherever you are going to be playing them, stacked together perhaps on a Kallax shelf, so you have that easy organization. But notice, we've all tried to store our Tiny Epic Dungeon stuff into the original 2 boxes, and it's a pain. As soon as you sleeve, it's an even bigger pain, and almost, but not entirely, impossible. I was able to do it, but I had to keep, I think it was the extra dice, and I know definitely the boss meeples, separate from everything else when I tried to cram everything together just in the original 2 boxes. This fits all of that. Base game in its deluxe form, the expansion, the boss meeples, the extra dice, and so on. You're not going to fit the dice tray in there. You're not going to fit the player mats or the play mat in there, of course. But by and large, this is a nice storage solution. But it is significantly taller, as I mentioned, than the other ones. This is the same size as I think I mentioned before, the same size as Tiny Epic Crimes. That's the other one that really needs a whole lot of space. Pirates is pretty large. Tactics is getting there. The ones that are small, like Kingdoms, tend to be things like Dinosaurs, where it's just the 1 box, or it's Galaxies or Beyond the Black, which are separate, that sort of thing. So this is just our quick look here at the Tiny Epic Dungeons official license box from eRaptor/Poland Games. As we now look at more Tiny Epic games in the future, starting with Tiny Epic Defenders next, looking at the 1st edition, the 2nd edition, and the expansion, we will also take a look in those same videos now at these storage solutions from eRaptor/Poland Games. I know I keep saying that. eRaptor's what I know them by. They actually do Kickstarters under both names and apparently work under both names. So I guess the slash is the appropriate way to say it. But whatever you want to call them, pretty nice packages. For the games. Okay, now I just made it weird. I'm done.